look at the supply chain as we go forward. My name's Eric Naiburg. I'll be your host today. And good morning from Pennsylvania as well, Cheryl. Your microphones will be muted throughout the session. However, this session will be recorded and the slides will be available within the next 24 hours. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab, not the chat tab, because those will be saved and then we can respond to any that we don't get to throughout the session today. Just briefly, for those of you new to this webinar, who is Scrum.org? Scrum.org is a mission-based organization focused on helping people and teams solve complex problems. Ken Schwaber is our founder, our chairman, and the co-creator of Scrum. And Ken oversees everything that we do. Scrum.org focuses on training, certification, and ongoing learning, like events like this, making sure that we can put these on for free and make them always publicly available to all. Next slide. A little bit about our speakers. So I'll go first and then I'll hand it off to them to introduce themselves because they could do a much better job than I can. My name is Eric Naiburg. As I said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Scrum.org, and I run a whole bunch of different aspects of the organization. I'll turn it over to Mirko. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, and hi, everybody from Switzerland. My name is Mirko Kleiner. I'm the president of the Lean Agile Procurement Alliance, and we are trying to lift the whole Agile movement to the next level, like from cross-functional to cross-company. And there are some amazing things we can learn, and at the same time, it also opens up a lot of new opportunities for all of us. So hand it over to Simon.
Hi, everyone. I'm talking to you from the United Kingdom. I'm a professional Scrum trainer, and I'm also a board member of the LAP Alliance. So I think the real power of harnessing procurement as part of our cross-functional team helps build much more robust, resilient organizations. And that's what we're going to talk about most of today.
Great. Thanks, Simon. Thank you, Mirko. Welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, so we didn't prepare who will start, so I'll just jump in. So this is all about it, you know. You might have heard some of those topics on the pictures, in the news, in TV, you know. It used to be like a simple world, maybe sometimes complicated, and there was, you know, one thing going on in the world. Currently, what we are observing is a kind of multidimensional disruptions, and unfortunately, they are not just hitting the businesses, they're hitting the whole supply or value chains. And we as the LAP Alliance are interested to understand how does that look like on a global scale, but also how is the Agile adoption in those intersections between the companies in those professions like procurement, supply chain, contracting, and so forth. And therefore, we do an annual report, an annual study, and in today's webinar, we want to have a little discussion among Simon and Eric about the results. And in the preparation, we figured out this is very relevant to Scrum.org. Why is that?
Yeah, and it's relevant in many ways. As Scrum teams, as Agile teams are building in building products, often those products aren't just built by the people inside. We need to bring in external folks. We need to bring in external natural resources. We need to bring in other kinds of contracts, and all of those play into that procurement space. And traditionally, we've thought of that as something separate and not part of the overall Agile ecosystem. But it needs to be. It needs to be thought of in an Agile way. We need to procure in an Agile way. And we need to procure in a way that ties to how we're building and developing and delivering our products. At Scrum.org, you may have seen some of our webinars over the last several months around the Agile Product Operating Model. What we've been talking a lot about is looking at how do we move from projects to product, and how do we move to a model around our organizations to better deliver those products, and focusing on the strategy, focusing on the people, focusing on how are we structured, and at the end of the day, how do we deliver value and deliver that value life cycle. Today, we're going to focus in on that circled part, procurement. But Simon, did you have anything you wanted to add before we move on?
No, I think just to call out that bottom left-hand quadrant hasn't really had a lot of airtime, and when we're thinking about governance, compliance, process structure, procurement, particularly when we get beyond the single team, which the Scrum Guide describes or the Kanban Guide describes, as soon as we get to larger portfolio, enterprise level, we need to start thinking about how we connect in a way that helps everybody succeed. And this win-win approach is the heart of effective collaboration. And so if we can start thinking in ways that how can we, as well as all of our partners, work together so that we can all be successful, we'll deliver better as organizations and as multi-organizations. So we'll build an ecosystem where everybody's doing well, which would be awesome, right?
Thanks, Simon. And before we jump ahead, Mirko, there's a question. I think it's probably a valid one to hit first. What is the Lean and Agile Alliance? Can you explain a little bit more about it?
Yeah, definitely. So initially, it's already 9 years old, and we are still in the early days, I would say, of a new kind of movement. Initially, we wanted to solve exactly those bottlenecks and process-oriented procurements. Because everybody that has been into an acquisition process, procurement, whatever the company calls it, from supplier side, or even if you're in a corporation on the buyer side, it couldn't be more bureaucratic, right? And so 9 years ago, we developed a new approach based on agile values and principles called Lean Agile Procurement, and which embodies what Simon just said. Let's embrace the agile values. Let's embrace collaboration. And around this initial idea, approach, now a whole alliance has and independent certification body has emerged. And we are proud to partner with Eric and Scrum.org, but we are also partnering with other certifications and alliances from the supply chain, from Lean, and so forth. So if you're interested, you want to know more, then wait till the end. We're going to share the link to our website as well. Yeah, Simon, anything important I missed?
No, we're trying to extend agile processes, practices, and principles into often very traditional approached parts of the organization.
Mm-hmm. So for today's conversation, and that we don't want to just have some boring numbers of our study. We go through the report, but as I said, we want to make this more engaging, and there is room for questions, obviously. So this is I think the 5th execution. So it's similar to the State of Agile study. We have created 5 years ago a similar study for the State of Agile in procurement and supply. So, and in the meanwhile, we have a global coverage with huge companies have participated in almost all the sectors. Now let's kickstart our conversation with this? I know it's very small letters, but from what is interesting, we asked the participants, what are the top three strategic priorities in your industry? And what has been a huge shift from last year's report to this year's report is the adaptability, business agility, whatever you want to call it, is a huge need in the commercial areas. What other things stands out to you guys? And what do you think are the reasons for it?
I'll jump in. I I think the pace of change in our global environment is picking up. There's been a number of interesting things geopolitically, a lot of changes around the world. And as we start to embrace AI, when we use AI as a thinking partner, as a tool, it is fueling that pace of change. AI is the fastest adopted technology in human history. It took a matter of months to penetrate to hundreds of millions of consumers. And when we're seeing that, using it as people, that this is going to affect our businesses, and that means we need to start thinking about how we respond to that. And if you have a look in that business agility and adaptability, that teal color, every organization, every sector is saying that's a big driver. And what's fascinating is the Scrum's 25 years old, and we're still saying that business agility and adaptability is one of our core things that we're looking for. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, and I think to kind of jump on that a little bit, I think we've learned a lot over the last 5 years, a significant amount about the need to be agile and the need for businesses to be able to evolve and change. And COVID really hammered that home for all of these sectors and for all of us. Right? I mean, I look at Scrum.org ourselves. Prior to 2020, we had zero virtual training options. 100% of our training was done in person, live, in front of an audience. That didn't work so well in March of 2020. We needed to evolve. We needed to be agile. We needed to adapt. Um, and that took time and that added risk to business. And I think what we've seen over the last 5 years is organizations looking at how much of that risk do we want to take, or how much more flexibility do we want in our business and in our business models to be able to handle this. I look at financial services companies who had entire trading floors unused in other states in case there was some sort of a natural disaster and they need to turn it on in another place. And now they've moved to realize, oh, wait, those folks can maybe work at home if we needed to. And do we need all of that extra space? That combined with just the speed of people delivering products, the speed of information going back and forth, makes it much harder for any business to succeed on its own. It makes it much harder for that business not to fall behind the competition, because the competition can get there so much more quickly. And I think that's what's driving both, what I see in that teal color, as Simon said, as well as in that yellowish tannish color there, the innovation and business model evolution. We need to evolve our business models to be able to adapt and be able to do the things that we need to do.
Hmm. Simon, just one comment, sometimes I'm not sure if AI is just another hype. It definitely adds a lot of value, right, to any business. But if we look at the numbers, in this pink box, it's just in one industry selected as one of the top three strategic topics, right? So it's interesting. I'm not saying that the others are not doing it, right? But they haven't selected it in our survey.
So I wonder if it's not a strategic, if that it's not strategic, or they're still evaluating the strategy,
Yeah,
right?
we'll
I think a
come to
lot
that.
of organizations I've met with and talked to, it's up there. It's one of the biggest things they're spending on, but they're trying to figure out how to make it a strategic initiative, and they're still learning about it and a little skeptical, of course.
Yeah.
So the next few slides are kind of annually repetitive because we want to see a little bit of a development there, and then we will come to this year's focus topic where we ask some questions about how does the next generation supply chain look like in the age of AI. So this number here, 90% answered that business agility is of strategic importance, is quite stable over all the years. On the other hand, the application could be much more, right? We will see that in this specific report, but I think everybody of us would agree that, if you look at your own company or your clients that you work with, they could do better. If you look at the numbers, the reasons for adopting Agile, and I put here the lenses of a commercial person, like procurement professional, the traditional kind of reasons for or focus topics are reducing risk and a very strong cost focus. And they have got over the past few years less and less important. So even for them, an enhanced ability to manage changing priorities, to gain speed in reduce time to market, etc., has become one of the big drivers in these other professions. So we always wondered, and that's a little bit a tricky question, what do you understand? What is Agile? Now, you guys in the audience might have a clear understanding. You might be a Scrum Master, Agile coach, or have been, in some of Scrum.org's training. But in the procurement or commercial area, they just understand the word and not what's behind. So for the very first time, thanks to AI, we ask an open question. So they needed to add, some description, and then we summarized it, what you can see on the left. And it's quite, overlapping with our general understanding what Agile means. On the other hand, if we then see, on the right-hand side, just a very simple question: are you still a lonely warrior, process-oriented, or do you have objectives on a team level or even on a value chain level? That's still very rare in comparison. So not sure if you guys want to add something to that.
I think this is the anecdotal bit of the perspective. If we do not work with our partners so that they're working in a similar way, it makes it much harder for us to be truly agile as an organization if we're locked in a very traditional phase-gated approach. So I think that extending the operational model across companies and what's more contractually, this becomes really important. So a key thing I see is procurement adopting agile principles will enable a better implementation of agile behaviors within an organization.
By the way, being an agile coach myself, my very first question, if there is a transformation ongoing already today, is who is your strategic partners and why are they not having a seat at the table in your transformation team? Think about it. We often are very much focused on ourselves only. It's exactly right what you said, Simon. from a consultancy perspective, that could enlarge our engagements much bigger. So it's a hidden tip. Just for if somebody is joining us today that has not an understanding what Agile is and how procurement is set up, procurement is somehow still a service to the Agile teams, to the business, to the organization. It's still operating very formal, very traditional. Like Simon and I had the conversation recently, quality assurance used to be a separate department as well, if you think about it. Now, where are we heading? Well, we are heading into something, and that's very similar what Eric explained about APOM, the Agile Product Operating Model. It's an organization that is organized around value creation. And now, the key question, where is procurement in all of that? Well, procurement becomes a key capability to connect with other teams and partners, as Simon said, and obviously they could also become a platform team to serve us with the right information. But long story short is we need to think of procurement, but also sales, account management, supply chain management, and other skills, agile contracting, if you think about it. We need to have those capabilities in our product teams or product organizations, similar as we now have, quality assurance, operation skills, and so on. And a great example of that is Hire. I come back to this case like always, because if you think about it, they have almost 5,000 product teams, or they call it micro enterprises. And they are purely self-organized. They can partner with internal teams, but also with external teams. And that doesn't work if you don't have those capabilities within the product teams, or you have at least in the first place access to it, which then will change the role of, for example, procurement, more becoming an enabler than the task receiver. So let's move on to where are we? How agile is procurement, but also sales, supply chain so far. And what we can see is the respondents said majority of them is in one way or the other in some stage of an agile transformation. But at the same time, just very few, just what we discussed before, include their partners into that. Any comments on that? Is that a surprise to you?
Eric, I'm curious what your thoughts are before I...
Everything's a surprise. It's disappointing. I don't know that it's surprising, right? That only 8% include their partners as part of their agile transformation, because most organizations are working with partners. They have partners involved. They have partners, whether they're supplying or working or doing, they're there and they're a crucial part of it. They also bring external views, which can often be valuable to the transformation process. They're maybe working with other clients. They have their arms in their organization that might be able to bring information that could be valuable. And I think often we kind of look at it as us and them instead of we. And we really need to think about it as how are we better together and how are we working better together. And especially if you want your partners and aligned with where you're going and aligned with what you're doing. If you leave them on the outside, it becomes difficult. It's funny. I have a couple of experiences now with hiring partners where we actually said we want to work in a Scrum approach. Imagine that. And it was hard to find contract partners that were doing it that way. And a lot of it fell into how they bill. A lot of it fell into, well, we bill time and materials. We said, well, how about we do this? We'll we'll uh, we'll 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 guarantee you 4 sprints, and then after two, we can decide if we want to renew and for an additional 4, and we'll continue to have that review cycle with you. And rather than hiring you just on a time and materials basis, we'll actually hire you for 4 sprints, and we'll guarantee you 4 sprints to start. And a lot of organizations on the partner side weren't willing to do that. So it's not just on the company, right? It's not just on the buyer. Often it's also on the seller, if you will. And their structures are not organized, and their fear is, well, how are we going to make money on this, and so on. So it's a two-way street.
It is, yeah. Simon,
Yeah,
anything to add?
roughly, I think those more conservative parts of the business, the ones that come up in that infrastructure quadrant in the APOM model, I think they're where the developers were in the late 90s. So there's a couple of pockets around the world where people are doing agile well, XP, Scrum, bits and pieces going on. So we're looking for them. First of all, within our own organization, we need our procurement, compliance, legal people to want to get engaged with other parties so that way we can then build a better contract together. And by doing that, we can then include that desire for our partners to behave in a iterative, incremental way with us. But we have to start at home, right?
And I think just one thing to add to that is I think there's the fear on the hiring side, which is they're not determining the value that they're receiving, and what often they'll get stuck in is, well, I'm paying them to do work. I don't want them involved in this, and they're missing out on the value that they can deliver by being involved in this as well.
Yeah, we will come back to the collaboration part and how contracts also are more in our way than supporting agile collaboration. But we asked participants, what are some good practices that you're using? And again, we are in procurement on the buy side, sales, and so on. And yeah, they're using some of the good practices. My personal observation is they're far, you would call it, Simon, they are where we were in the agile movement 20 years ago.
Yeah, and are they mechanical, or are they really shifting how they
Yeah.
work? Right. You read a lot of these things, and many of them are not mind shift type activity.
Exactly.
Are they running their daily scrum like a project management meeting? Or are they really looking at their sprint goal and how they're going to adjust and the things that they're going to change to achieve their goals? Are they using Kanban boards just as a way to track work? Or are they really having discussions around them and those sorts of things?
Exactly. So we are still in the annual, repetitive questions. I think that's the last one. What is the agile majority on agile contracts? It's also interesting, very few in the agile community, push that button, push that topic, and it's an important one in my opinion. And I want to give you a little side story here. I often give keynotes on in the commercial community. And once in a while, I ask the lawyers, how much, do you know, or are you asked to contract for an agile collaboration? 1-2 years ago, it was almost, just a few hands. In the meanwhile, this has shifted a lot. So I would say 80% in last year's conference in Edinburgh, in one of the biggest commercial conference in Europe. The lawyers and commercial people said, yeah, but we don't know how. And that's exactly what we are seeing here. A lot of them are forced to contract, could even come from the business or delivery, that they say, we want to contract, we want to work in a collaborative, more agile-like way with our partners, as Eric was describing, but the lawyers can't support it because they don't know the tools. And I made this very simple graph here, this in the next slide. This is the strategy we are in. Currently, the contracts are separating the parties, as Eric was saying, it's us and them. If you do something wrong, you are reliable. You will get a penalty and so forth.
And that's the interesting thing, Mirko, is because the tradition, the history that we have with contracts, they're traditionally adversarial. And that's where you're talking about liabilities and clauses and late clauses and penalties and bonuses. It's not the typical structure for a contract, a legal document is me versus you.
Yeah. And they're also assuming we know everything up front. If not, there's huge charges, right? All change requests.
Exactly. And my observation is, I agree with both of you. It's less of they don't want to, it's they just don't know. It's also culturally, I've put a subtitle here. The assumption is we can't trust the partner. Now, how weird is that? Would you don't trust your partner? But in business, it seems to be different. So the contract, we are managing the risks via the contract. It's just an observation. Nothing wrong about it, and so on. So what's the solution? Well, there are plenty of, we have developed in the past 9 years a whole framework around agile contracts. But I explain it this way. The assumption is that we're gonna have a trust-based collaboration with our partner or partners, and we need to have a legal foundation. We still want to be compliant. We want to rule some of the constraints and so on. But this legal framework, this contracts, have to support the cross-company collaboration instead of hindering it. So this is how I explain it. And the great example is, bring this up all the time, is the joint development of the COVID-19 vaccine, where we were fortunate to have the CEO, Ugur Sahin, CEO of BioNTech, 2 years ago on the World Agility Forum, speaking about that they just started not having a contract agreed, hundreds of pages. That's a multi-billion dollar, was a multi-billion dollar investment, and with an outlook of multi-billion dollar of profits if they're gonna make it, but nobody knew if they're gonna make it. So he said, well, the only thing we knew was we are the right parties. It was 3 companies, BioNTech, Fosun, and Pfizer. Nobody else can do it, so it's on us, and we're gonna agree on a high-level governance and a high-level cost and profit split, and then they just started. And my takeaway is, he said in the video, I don't gonna play it today, why can't we have such collaborations all the time? It shouldn't be the exception. Was the most successful project, as he said. So let's jump to our focus topic. We have a few more slides. So supply chain. What is a supply chain? Simon, would you like to help me out? Just
So
for somebody that has no clue.
yeah,
Expect
when
I'm
you
5 years old.
all right, so if you're 5 years old, it's hot where you are, right? So you're probably looking forward to an ice cream.
Mm,
Now, when you go to the shop and get your ice cream, there's got to be a whole lot of things in place to get that ice cream into that shop. We got to make it, we got to wrap it, and we got to get it to your shop. But then we have to work it back from there to even getting the cocoa beans and the
mm,
milk from the cows so that we can make you your ice cream. Every step along that way between cow, cocoa plant to ice cream is the supply chain.
mm.
And so
Exactly.
it's normally multiple parties, multiple shipping, and where your organization plugs into that is a matter of choice. And this is where you get many, many different business models. And IKEA are fascinating because one of their aspects is they own their own forests
Mm.
because that way they've got greater control over their supply chain. So that's one model, for instance.
Yeah, thank you. One thing I was disappointed about was the German car industry. I think it applies also to Ford and any other traditional car brand. They're basically just assembly companies. They don't build the parts, right? They buy it. So as last year we started to dive into this topic of supply chain, partner ecosystems, and so on. And so this is the second time we asked the question: in what scenarios do you collaborate with multiple partners or even make use of a supply chain? And to me, this was eye-opening because this is the whole product life cycle, right? So again, it makes a lot of sense if we talk about product organization, agile product organization models to cover this important capability. One more thing I forgot to say, might be interesting for you guys in the audience as well. Did you know that in the private sector, up to 80% of revenues are in hands of commercial people? So if your company is struggling, if your client is struggling commercially, then they shouldn't work on their leadership, or, I mean, they can, but we, with our work, not just in procurement, we have a direct impact on revenues. So it's huge if you think about the business impact. So I was talking too much. So pick something, Simon, Eric, from these numbers.
Yeah, and actually, I'll go back a little bit in the thought, and it'll kind of lead into this.
Mm,
There's a great old video, a guy, Milton Friedman, who talks about what it takes to make a pencil. Right? So take the simplest thing that we could think of. A pencil is pretty simple, and the thousands of people that have to be involved at a global level, because you can only get rubber from so many places, you can only get lead from so many places, you have to carve the wood and so on. And he in this very short video, he describes the supply chain of just creating a little pencil.
mm,
Now let's expand upon that to most of the businesses that you all are working in. And if some of you are working in the pencil business, you know this. But right, and now we start to look at what does it take, and then the pressures that come on and so on. And I think the what we're seeing at the top of this is what drives most of it. It's that cost pressure. It's everybody's always concerned with cost first, and we have to be because that's what we're dealing with. We're measured on profit and loss. Our customers aren't going to buy if our prices are too high, and so on. And those drive a lot of what we do, and that defines the challenge. So we have to work at how do we overcome that, and how do we manage those risks. Part of it is not having those overcharges that I talked about earlier. If we can build a contract in a way that has unknowns already built into it instead of surcharges for unknowns, well, now we're going to handle some of those pressures. We're going to be able to build it in a more agile way to come together and work together on the product and delivering that value.
Well,
That's so key, right? Working together. And if you have a look at that cost pressure and inflation, one of the biggest challenges to organizations is cost of delay. Now, if we're adopting a traditional procurement approach where we have to go through the phases of procurement, put it out to market, RFP, tender process, response to questions, evaluation, shortlisting, interview process, negotiation, final contract, that can take a year. So for our cross-functional team, they're not adding any value for that year, but they've just cost the business in better part of 2 million, as well as the cost to our suppliers. Now, if we can shorten that, first of all, time to deliver reduces dramatically. Secondly, when we use a collaborative approach, that second key point, demand volatility and forecasting, is a core discussion. And I've been on both sides of the fence as a supplier and somebody looking for suppliers. When you're putting it through and you know that basically the people trying to procure the service are looking for the lowest cost possible. And so that they're looking for that lowest price bidder, then you start getting the very interesting contracts with those extortionate change requests that you're talking about earlier, Eric. And so that then gets us into our legal argy-bargy, which leads us back to our top point. As soon as we start calling in our lawyers at a per hourly basis, we're slowing things down, everything goes on hold. So the need for a collaborative approach has never been more present.
And number two has a direct impact on number one, right? That forecasting inaccuracy. We're always going to be inaccurate when we forecast. That's why it's called a forecast, which means let's remove that barrier and from the start know that we don't know everything. And let's build that contract. Let's build that relationship to help us learn as we go. Let's be empirical and let's drive toward a solution rather than trying to forecast everything up front. And that's what we do is we build time and materials contracts. We assume there's an end date. We assume we know everything up front. And then that puts that cost pressure on that gives us the volatility, that gives us the inaccurate forecasts. And it hits number three because the market may change. If this is a long contract, this is a long agreement and a long product, the market will change as we're building. And we need to be able to adapt to those things. Or we can just throw out what we thought we were going to build 3 years ago in 3 years and just not have a market for it.
I would like to add.
Also, sorry, Mirko.
Yeah. I just want to add, what Simon said, procurement alone, and I'm talking about strategic procurement, which is the most complex thing where you have, per definition, a lot of unknowns. Sometimes even everything is just a hypothesis. Usually takes up to 12 months. So even if it used to be a hypothesis at the start, just imagine what used to be a good idea 12 months ago, it became completely irrelevant. And then the second thing on the cost pressure, just a little anecdote. For a huge pharmaceutical company, a client of us, I was coaching one of their account manager. It's a $100 million contract, and he was talking about we want to have an influence on their roadmap. We're investing a lot in them, and so on and so on. So he spoke for 15 minutes about their strategic partner, and after a while of listening, I told him everything you talked about. This is a strategic partner, but everything that I'm hearing is you're treating them as suppliers. And I'm pretty sure the contract is also set up like a buyer supplier, not on the same eye level thing. And it made him think. And what I want to say with that, just to give you a giveaway, cost pressure, everything has a certain price. Going back to the car manufacturers, they have cost engineers that engineer what the maximum price of the engine can be, or a tire, or the brake, so that in total they still get their margin. And there's a price engineering around that. So to me, this is not a cost pressure on the vendor. This is a joint challenge, right? Hey, these are the given constraints. Let's figure out together how we get there. Maybe our idea of a brake is too complicated, too many parts. You have a better idea with better materials, and so on and so on. So that's where we are going. So we are lifting this buyer-supplier relationship into a true partnership, and sometimes even on a win-win basis, that they participate on success or even savings or whatsoever.
Yeah, hang on. There's a question that's popped in. It's saying, do we need to become comfortable with smaller time frame contracts, or if we should have flexibility in a long-term contract? And sounding like a typical consultant, it depends. And this is the situation, and that context is so key that we keep talking about in Agile training courses and Agile discussions. When we're in a complex situation, there is more unknown than known. So we need to have that discussion up front. And we need to work, as Mirko was saying, if we're looking for a true peer partnership relationship, we have that discussion with our partners and going, well, what is the best? Should we be having multiple small, shorter contracts, or do we need, there may be a master service agreement, and underneath that we can put in some smaller contracts. There might be one large contract with a very flexible change clause. The whole intent is to collaborate to create a win-win. Because
if I may add to that, Simon,
yeah,
if we are looking for a true partnership, then we want to have a sustainable relationship, right? So it's not our initial intent to swap after the first 2 sprints. But what is missing today is the capability to do so if needed. And then it's in both parties' favor, because we figure out that we thought they are the right partner for solving this problem, but they aren't, or just partially, and we need somebody else. So let's go back to the slides. We have, I think, 2 or 3 more. Otherwise, we hit the time box, and then we get bad comments. So AI. For most of you in the audience, I'm pretty sure you have no clue how advanced, for example, legal departments and lawyer already using AI for many, many years, even before it became a hype. And we can see that here. There are already a lot of vendors out there to automate things, analyze big data, even among multiple data pods and so on and so on. Where it becomes interesting is if we also ask, what's the application ratio? And that's still very limited. And it's in line with my gut feeling, everybody is, and also Eric mentioned it, for sure everybody is doing experiments, trying to find how this fits into their strategy or enriches their strategy and so forth. But it's not yet a thing. And again, just to repeat, we're talking about supply chain management, cross-company applications, and so on. Do you guys want to say something about the graph on the right?
I think that is the data echoing your point, right? And agentic AI may be able to help us work with suppliers with questions, work with our partners with questions, and it may help in very, very simple cases. However, we still need strategic oversight because there might be business constraints about various things that we need to become aware of. So we just need to be very mindful as we use AI, as in everything.
Yeah, and looking at AI as essentially just another team member who we're still going to work with, we're going to pair with, and we're going to review because it's also going to hallucinate and get things wrong. So just like any teammate, we're not going to just trust everything is black and white. There's definitely a lot of gray in there. But can it help us? Can it help us think about things we haven't thought about? Can it help us interpret data in a non-biased way? Yes. And we can take advantage of that and take advantage of those opportunities to speed certain things to market, to speed certain decisions, and certainly as an enabler, and as an enabler to all of us to move forward.
I'd like to add one little story here because, you might have read it in the meanwhile. 96%, so almost everybody thinks that AI will affect our ways of working. So from a procurement, contracting, supply chain point of view, I recently was using ChatGPT to create a contract, a license agreement with a partner. And I'm not a lawyer. But I was capable to get a 80% okay version that I could use for the negotiations in less than an hour. Now, traditionally, that would have took me, together with a legal agency, a few weeks, plus then another few weeks if I would be in a big corporation to get all the approvals. Now, to me, that little story is an eye-opener because AI is not just, affecting my personal, getting faster in my day job, but also the surroundings like approval processes, any other process and structure and roles might become obsolete or at least need to keep up with the pace that I am now able to deliver something. So finally, we asked the participants, on this journey, how AI will affect our ways of working. How important do you think are agile practices, principles, and values? And it's a little bit of a selfish question, of course. But I'm a strong believer that, in this big menu or buffet, as I like to say, of good practices that the Agile community has developed in the past 20 years, we will come back to it. There is a huge opportunity for all of us, not just jumping on AI and become the next AI coach, but also to stick to organizational and individual change or even cross-company improvements, because we need experts that know what are, how we can improve, how can we use that in a sense of improving the ways of working. I'm interested in your opinion.
And I think, the way this question's worded is also interesting, right? Importance of agile practices and principles for leveraging AI. Because I think there's two ways to look at it. One is that way, one is for implementing AI as well. Because I think agile practices play a part in both. Um, the importance in leveraging AI and that 85% saying important and very important is not a surprise to me, because AI and the way we're going to use AI is certainly today for the unforeseen future is complex. This is a complex project, and we need to approach it iteratively and incrementally. We need to learn. It's a learning model on its own. So if we don't teach it incrementally, we're in trouble. If we don't have values in place and governance in place, we're in trouble, because we need to look at that. Even in your example earlier around contracts and in using it to create contracts, there's a reverse of that in using it to evaluate contracts.
Mm.
Right? In that way, but also we have to have things in our contracts now to protect us against our suppliers delivering things that used AI that they may not have the IP rights to. I'm now channeling my IP lawyer, who she's in a panic right now because it's very gray, a lot of gray area of who owns the IP if it was generated from AI. And it very much depends on what was generated, how it was generated, where it originated from. Is it a voice that's just reading my script? Or did it take a whole bunch of stuff from someone else's IP and just present it as its own? And now it's stolen IP,
Mm.
right? So there's a whole lot that comes into play here. And so we need to have that governance. We need to have the areas that we're looking at for values in having values put in place. We need to deliver incrementally and iteratively. We need to constantly review it. We need to refer to it. We need to have plans around how are we going to leverage AI in the work that we're doing and adjust those plans as we go forward, right? We're going to retro on this. We're going to have a retrospective around how we used it. Well, what can we learn from that? What can we do differently? How can we improve our work and so on? All things that came out of really the Agile community.
Mm. Yeah, so the final slide, no big surprise on the benefits. Adopting Agile in procurement supply commercial areas, similar to, traditional studies. What is interesting to me is, the second one, currently business resilience is a big topic you might have heard of. And the other one was also on the industry overview, increasing co-innovation. And let's be frank, how can co-innovation happen without having the right people and minds together? So it's that stupidly simple, right? But sometimes I think we need to unlearn or relearn some obvious things.
The right people, the right minds, and the right technologies. I'd add
Yes.
technology, right? If we're talking about AI.
Yep.
So I want to be conscious of our time box, as you mentioned, and we're kind of at it. Any questions we didn't get to, we'll try to get to those via email, as long as the name's attached to it and the email's attached to it. I want to take a moment to thank Mirko and Simon for joining me today. Thank our audience. Hopefully, you found this valuable. You've got their contact information. Feel free to reach out to Simon and Mirko as well, with questions, with help that you need or other things. And with that, I just want to say thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everybody.